Standing in the doorway of my past and stepping into a future defined by hard truths, I find myself recalling the journey that brought me here. My name is Rachel Carter, and as I stand in uniform today, I am reminded of a childhood filled with expectations, disappointments, and silent battles for recognition. In our small Virginia town, the Carter name carried weight and reverence, a name so deeply woven into military honor and family legacy that it shaped every expectation. Yet from the very beginning, I was cast in the shadow of my more celebrated older brother, Daniel, whose achievements perfectly embodied everything our father had ever dreamed of. I vividly remember the day at my grandmother's funeral. Standing in the parking lot amid grief and familial loss, I heard my father's cold words, "You were a disappointment to the family name." That single moment, seared by heartbreak and derision, laid the groundwork for my journey, a journey toward forging an identity defined not by inherited privilege but by the hard-earned truth of justice. Determined to break free from the confines of being the backup or the silent presence in family portraits, I pushed myself relentlessly. Every childhood smile, every accolade in academics and personal pursuits, felt like a quiet rebellion against a legacy that had always favored another. The halls of my youth resonated with the echoes of selective praise. While Daniel's athletic feats and military promise won him a new car and loud celebrations, my academic triumphs and heartfelt commitments were acknowledged only with a dismissive nod. Over time, I realized that success was not in meeting familial expectations but in carving my own path, one that would eventually lead me to the Judge Advocate General's Corps. Every memory of awkward family gatherings, every slight uttered by my father, became the fuel for the relentless pursuit of excellence in my legal career. I embraced the values of integrity and precision, keenly aware that my dedication would someday be measured not against the backdrop of the Carter name, but by the unwavering truth of justice. Now, standing on the threshold of a case that intertwines my personal history with my professional responsibility, I feel the weight of every lesson learned and every suppressed tear. I have come to understand that the path toward redemption, both personal and institutional, demands courage to confront even the deepest wounds of the past. My childhood memories float before me like vivid snapshots, a mix of sunlit moments and lingering shadows. I remember the warm afternoons when my father's praise was reserved entirely for Daniel. His athletic achievements and military promise shone brightly, while my academic successes went largely unrecognized. I recall a day when Daniel's football prowess earned him a brand new car, celebrated loudly by the family, while my own achievements in school were met with a polite nod and a remark that grades aren't everything. The sting of that difference echoed painfully through my formative years, instilling in me both a yearning for validation and a deep sense of isolation. Every success I had was juxtaposed against an undercurrent of neglect, a daily reminder that I was never the favored child in a family where tradition demanded perfection. I spent many years navigating a world where milestones were celebrated selectively. Family gatherings became a gallery of contrasting honors. Photos captured Daniel's radiant smiles during grand celebrations, while my moments of achievement were tucked away like quiet secrets. I vividly remember being named valedictorian, a title that should have been a crowning glory, only to have it diminished by my father's offhand remark that character matters more than grades. That comment was a subtle dismissal of all my hard work and accomplishments, a reminder that despite the brilliance of my academic record, I was still the spare child, always in the background during the grand narrative of the Carter legacy. Over time, these early experiences shaped my inner resolve. I began to see that recognition and genuine self-worth must be earned independently, not handed down by tradition or family expectation. Each achievement, each long night studying or preparing for the next challenge, was a quiet act of defiance against a narrative that too often discounted my abilities. The contrast between the lavish celebrations for Daniel's milestones and the muted acknowledgments of my own successes taught me a harsh lesson about fairness and merit. I internalized every slight, using every disappointment to drive a burning desire to not only prove myself but to redefine what it meant to be a Carter. In those silent moments alone, I vowed that someday I would become the person I knew I was meant to be, a person whose accomplishments would speak for themselves, filling the gaps left by neglect and rewriting the legacy in my own precise, unyielding way. Embarking on my military career marked a turning point that propelled me into a world where every decision had profound personal and national implications. Joining the Judge Advocate General's Corps was more than a career choice. It was my chosen path to reclaim the narrative of my life, driven by a desire to prove that merit and dedication should always triumph over inherited expectations. The military's legal corridors became my proving ground, where the daily grind of case reviews, legal briefs, and investigations sharpened not only my professional skills but also my sense of justice. Determined to build a legacy based solely on truth, I immersed myself completely in the responsibilities of my duty, intent on upholding every ounce of integrity I had earned along the way. What began as a routine inquiry into financial discrepancies soon evolved into an investigation that shook the very core of everything I had known about the Carter name. While sifting through routine bank records and coded communications, I uncovered a labyrinth of deception, a network of bribery, kickbacks, and fraudulent transactions that cast a dark shadow over decades of trusted service. Every piece of evidence, every transcript and encrypted message, pointed to a shocking truth: behind the decorum of military distinction lay a sinister pattern of corruption. At the center of this dark web was my own father, Colonel Thomas Carter, whose reputation for honor and duty had been the cornerstone of our family legacy. Over the span of many years, he had exploited that heritage, channeling illicit gains while jeopardizing the safety and trust of countless service members. The deeper I delved, the more the personal and the professional merged. It was as if every page of evidence was a burning indictment not only of his actions but also of the stifled longing that had haunted me since childhood, the desperate desire for a father's approval that was never truly given. The meticulous records I compiled formed an unassailable case, each fact reinforcing the harsh reality that the man I once sought validation from was the architect of a corrupt empire. The investigation became an inner battle as much as it was a legal necessity, forcing me to reconcile the painful contradictions of my past with the unwavering demands of duty. The pursuit of truth, though riddled with personal sacrifices, was my only path forward. I felt an unyielding resolve solidify within me, affirming that justice must prevail, even when it meant standing alone against the legacy that had long defined me. There was no way to retreat. The duty to expose corruption, regardless of its origins, demanded that I press on, following every shred of evidence that pointed to a painful but necessary reckoning with my father's transgressions. On the day the preliminary hearing began, the military courtroom exuded an atmosphere of solemnity and unspoken gravity. The morning light filtered through tall, arched windows, casting long shadows across polished floors and immaculate benches. Every detail, the crisp uniforms, glistening medals, and neatly arranged files, spoke of decades of tradition and duty. I took my seat at the prosecution table, mindful of every ribbon on my chest, each a testament to 20 years of steadfast service and unyielding pursuit of justice. In that moment, the room transcended its function as a stage for legal proceedings. It became a setting for an intimate confrontation between past hurts and present truths. In the front row, I observed the man who had, for so long, dismissed my worth, my father, Colonel Thomas Carter. His posture, a blend of authority and concealed tension, told a silent story of inner conflict. Close to him sat my older brother Daniel, whose eyes betrayed apprehension and the weight of divided loyalties. Their presence in the courtroom added a personal dimension to a case that had long simmered beneath the surface of our family's public persona. Meanwhile, the gallery filled with our relatives revealed faces etched with shock, regret, and uneasy curiosity. Every whispered glance and tentative posture underscored the tension that now tethered our family's legacy to a courtroom drama. When the ceremonial bath called the room to order, the charged silence was broken only by the measured steps of Judge Colonel Evelyn Tran, whose reputation for fairness and unwavering resolve set the tone for what was to come. The environment was charged with expectation. Every detail, from the polished wood of the benches to the unyielding order of the proceedings, aligned with the dramatic unfolding of a case that was far more than a legal proceeding. It was a moment of reckoning with history. With every measured breath, I prepared to present the opening statement that would dismantle years of deception and bias, aware that each word would be weighed not only in legal terms but also in the currency of a personal legacy long dominated by shadows. As I reached the midpoint of my opening statement, a palpable shift swept over the courtroom, a charged silence that rippled through the rows of uniformed faces. In that moment, I became aware of a reaction I had long anticipated yet dreaded. My father's gaze shifting, his face turning ashen, as if the truth I meticulously laid out was peeling away the carefully constructed mask of authority he had worn for so long. The change was subtle but unmistakable, an unspoken admission that the layers of deception were dissolving in front of everyone, even as I continued to unravel the narrative of corruption before a room that had witnessed decades of Carter legacy. Around me, the reactions of those closest to him spoke volumes. My older brother Daniel's usually steady gaze wavered, his expression softened into one of vulnerability as the weight of the unfolding revelations pressed heavily upon him. Even the defense, represented by an expensive civilian attorney whose earlier composure had been unassailable, faltered as the evidence took center stage. Every subtle gesture and fleeting glance hinted at an internal struggle, an acknowledgement that the carefully maintained legacy was crumbling under the relentless force of truth. In that defining span of time, where duty collided with deeply personal history, I continued my statement with a measured intensity, each carefully chosen word serving as both a legal assertion and a cathartic release of years spent in quiet despair. It was in that charged moment of confrontation, with my father visibly shaken in the courtroom collectively holding its breath, that I recognized the profound significance of my role. The pursuit of justice was no longer an abstract duty but a deeply personal act of reclamation, a way to lay bare the suppressed truths of my upbringing and to finally claim an identity that was built on integrity and honor. Every word I spoke was a step toward a personal liberation, a final stand to ensure that the truth, however painful, would prevail. As the proceedings drew to a close, the courtroom gradually emptied, leaving behind an echo of solemn finality and a lingering sense of transformation. Judge Colonel Evelyn Tran had delivered her decisive ruling. The evidence was overwhelming, and it was sufficient to proceed with a full court-martial against my father. In that moment, the old structures of our family legacy began to crumble, replaced by a new order founded on transparency, accountability, and unyielding integrity. The judgment was not merely a legal pronouncement, it was the culmination of years spent reconciling personal wounds with professional duty, a moment when the burden of the past was openly challenged by the demands of a just future. Left alone near the now quiet prosecution table, I found myself facing my father one last time. The brief encounter was heavy with unspoken words, a silent acknowledgement of years marred by both neglect and the pursuit of truth. In the stillness that followed, I sensed something unexpected, a reflection of hard-earned respect in his eyes. This flicker was not born of pride or affection, but an acceptance of the undeniable power of justice. Though our paths had diverged long ago, that fleeting look affirmed the inescapable truth that upholding integrity was a duty that transcended even familial bonds. In that intimate moment, I realized that the journey I had embarked upon, from the isolated halls of childhood neglect to the stern corridors of military justice, had evolved into something far greater than a personal vendetta. It was a commitment to reshaping a legacy tainted by corruption into one defined by ethical courage and honesty. Even as the weight of the past pressed upon every step I took, I emerged with a renewed sense of purpose. Stepping out into the cool night air, I welcomed the challenges of the upcoming trial as the next chapter in a story that, while marred by the tarnish of betrayal, was now illuminated by the promise of true justice. The legacy of the Carters was ending here, but in its place, a new beginning was set to blossom, a future where every fallen piece of the past was reassembled into a foundation for integrity, accountability, and hope.